All right, so starting off with our topic related to coordination and response. In coordination and response, we are going to take a look at the nervous system. Okay, then along with the nervous system, we are also going to take a look at our hormonal system. Especially, we're going to be talking about your glucagon and insulin. We're going to take a look at the responses of your eye, right? Your accommodation reflex, pupil reflex. So, all of that we are going to be covering in this topic. So, first thing that we're going to take a look at is obviously our concept related to the nervous system. Now, when we talk about the nervous system, when we talk about the nervous system, so in the nervous system, we have to go ahead and obviously start by first talking about the first we have to go ahead and we have to talk about how your nervous system functions or how your nervous system actually works, right? So first thing that we're going to in this topic, basically you can divide this topic into two categories: the nervous system and the endocrine system. So let's go ahead and start off with the nervous system first. You should not only know about the nervous and the endocrine system, but you should also be able to differentiate between the two of them. So when we talk about the nervous system can be divided into two portions, right? What are the two portions that we can divide the nervous system in? We can divide the nervous system into central nervous system and we can divide it into the peripheral nervous system. When we talk about the central nervous system, so the central nervous system is actually composed of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain and the spinal cord all together are known as the central nervous system. The peripheral nervous system includes the cranial and spinal nerves. So think of it this way, that your brain and spinal cord are the central nervous system. Then from the brain, we get nerves that are coming out of the brain. The nerves that are coming out of the brain, we call them cranial nerves. Okay. Cranium is a term for brain. So cranial nerves. Okay. And the nerves that come out from the spinal cord, they are known as the spinal nerves. So a central nervous system has just the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system has the cranial nerves, that are the nerves that are coming out of the brain, as well as the spinal nerves which are coming out of the spinal cord. Now, you have to know a few important terminologies to actually understand the topic of coordination and response. So, when we talk about a few important terminologies that you have to know, let's first of all talk about our peripheral nervous system. So, when we talk about our nervous system is made up of neurons. What are neurons? Neurons are simply the cells of the nervous system. Neurons are the cells of the nervous system. When we talk about neurons, neurons can be of three types. We can have sensory neurons. What do sensory neurons do? It's in the name, right? They sense, they feel. Okay. Sensory neurons carry nerve impulses. They carry nerve impulses from the sense organs. So your sense organs are eyes, nose, your taste buds, your skin, your ears, right? Your all of that is considered as your sense organs. So they carry your nerve impulses from the sense organs to the central nervous system. So these are your sensory neurons, the one that will take the nerve impulse from your eyes, from your ears, from your nose, and they'll convey to the brain. Then inside the brain, we have relay neurons. In relay neurons are intermediate neurons, right? They help in making connections inside the brain. All right? They help in making connections between the neurons. If two neurons want to connect with each other, they will connect with each other with the help of relay neurons. Okay, so they're sort of like the intermediate messenger, right? Carrying the messenger from one neuron to another. So they make connections with other neurons in the central nervous system. Where do we find them? We find them in the brain. Then, thirdly, we have motor neurons. Motor neurons carry impulses away from CNS away from the central nervous system to the effectors. What are your effectors? Effectors are your muscles or your glands, whatever, Your effectors are muscles, glands, anything that will respond to the stimulus is considered an effector. So we can have three types of neurons. We can have those neurons that are considered as sensory neurons, or we can have relay neurons, or we can have motor neurons. Now, when we talk about so these are three terminologies that you should know. Other than this, you should also know what is a receptor and what is an effector. When we talk about a receptor is something that detects the change in stimulus or that detects the change in environment, right? So a receptor detects change in the environment. It detects the change in environment. For example, in the eyes, we have rods and cones, which I will teach you about in this topic. In our skin, we can have pressure sensors, right? We can have pressure receptors. We can have temperature receptors. We have in our ear, we have receptors over there. We have receptors in our nose. So all of these are pain receptors also, right? So these are all examples of receptors. Then we can have effectors. Effectors are includes your glands and muscles. Now, we need to know about the structure of a neuron. When we talk about a structure of a neuron, so a structure of a neuron looks something like this. So the structure of a neuron, I'm going to tell you the general structure, Hajra, but technically speaking, the structure of a motor neuron and a sensory neuron are slightly different, but you don't have to go in that much detail. So let me first make for you a sensory neuron. A sensory neuron looks like this. This is the this is, let's say, the sensory receptor. Okay, in the skin. Let's say this is a temperature receptor or a pain receptor, whatever it is, right? Okay, so this one that I've drawn for you, this is a sensory neuron. Okay, so this is your receptor in the skin. This is the cell body or the body of the uh, this is the cell body or the body of the neuron, and this over here is your nucleus, right? Then when we are going to go ahead and we're going to talk about it, so you can see that your over here towards the end we have some long branching structures. These long branching structures are known as dendrites. Okay, then when we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about it, the entire nerve fiber is surrounded with an insulating material. The entire nerve fiber is surrounded by an insulating material. That insulating material is known as myelin sheath. Okay, that is known as a myelin sheath. This is a sensory neuron. Then we can have, for example, a motor neuron. A motor neuron will have similar structures, Hajra. It's just that it's slightly different, right? How is it slightly different? It's slightly different like this, that it tends to have, a lot more dendrites than what we see with sensory neurons. Okay, sensory neurons don't have that many dendrites. Motor cells, on the other hand, motor neurons have a lot of them. Right? And along with a lot of dendroids, it then has, this is the cell body. The cell body and the dendrites are all in the same area. And then you have your motor nerve. And obviously, the motor nerve is going to be surrounded by the insulating material. The insulating material is known as myelin sheath. And then here towards the end, we are going to have some branches. These branches are known as motor endings. Right? So this is your cell body. This is your nucleus. This is your nerve fiber. And these are known as motor endings. Motor endings are those areas that connect to the muscles or our effector, whatever the effector is. And this will make a bit more sense when I go over with you the your reflex arc, right? So this is how what the neurons actually look like. Now, how do these neurons actually work? To understand how these neurons actually work, we have to take a look at something that is known as the reflex arc. What is the reflex arc and how does it actually work? When we talk about the reflex arc, so reflex arc is something that is a reflex response of your body. Meaning, for example, when you blink, do you think before you blink? Not really, right? Like you don't think before you blink. You just go ahead and you do it. Or when you are, for example, you touch something that's really hot, do you actually think about it before removing your hand? You do not, right? You will never think about it. You are just going to remove your hand. If you, for example, feel any kind of pain, right? You prick your finger on a pin. You're not going to think about it. You're just going to respond immediately, right? If someone points something at your eyes, you're going to blink immediately, right? There's no thinking involved. This is known as the reflex arc. There are a lot of responses that your body does without you having to think about it. There are a lot of responses your body will do where you don't have to. There are a lot of responses for which you don't have to respond. You don't even have to think about it. So that is known as your reflex arc. Now you get a lot of questions on reflex arc. So in our reflex arc, what are we going to do? You guys should know all of the steps, right? The steps are really important. You guys should know all of the steps because like I said, you guys get lots of questions on it. So let's go ahead and take a look at our reflex arc now. So when we talk about the reflex arc, what is, like I told you guys, what is reflex arc? How can you guys explain it, for example, in the exam? In the exam, what can you guys say? You can say it is the automatic response. Automatic response to a stimulus. You guys might be wondering, Miss, what is a stimulus? A stimulus. Let's see. How can we define a stimulus? A stimulus. A stimulus is a change in the external or internal environment of an organism. Now, when we are going to go ahead and talk about it, let's talk about what is the reflex arc, right? So, what is the reflex arc? First, I'll tell you guys the steps, and then I will explain to you guys how does it happen, the way it actually happens. So, in a reflex arc, the way the process is going to happen is this, that there is a stimulus. All right, we have a stimulus. That stimulus, okay, a good example of the stimulus that is mentioned in your textbook and in your syllabus is that when you go to a doctor for a usual checkup, right? One of the exams that the doctor performs is that they tap your knee with a hammer. What are they actually tapping? They're tapping the tendon on the knee. By tapping the tendon on the knee, they can check your reflexes and make sure that your nerves are working properly. So, we have a stimulus. For example, the stimulus is tapping the tendon. Right? Now, what is happens that inside your tendon, you have a receptor. In the tendon, we have stretch receptor. But you guys can change the answer to whatever is given in the question. So, for example, if you put your hand on something hot, then it's a pain receptor. If something comes in your eye, then that's the receptor in your eye that's going to be stimulated, right? Then the information is going to travel through the sensory neuron. That's what we had just studied. We had studied about the sensory neuron. So, through the sensory neuron, the nervous system will convey the message, where it will convey the message to not the brain, actually the spinal cord. A lot of your reflexes are controlled by the spinal cord. This is to save time so that you can respond quickly and as fast as possible, right? For example, imagine that you had put your hand on something hot. Now, it would take time for the impulse to go all the way to your brain. In your brain as well, by the way, there are different centers. There's one center of the brain that is conscious thinking, right? That, for example, if you want to lift up your hand, you do it consciously. There is a part of your brain that's unconscious, right? For example, your breathing, your heart rate. You're not consciously controlling them. You can't control them even if you want to, right? They are unconscious portions. So now, and so think about it. If the message went all the way to your brain and then your brain made the effort, all right, we have to lift the hand away from something that's hot, it would take more time. Think about the damage that could happen, right? The body wants to respond quickly because this is an emergent situation. We have to respond ASAP, right? So the body is not going to send the message all the way to the spinal cord, to the brain. It will go to the spinal cord. Okay. In the spinal cord, you have cells that will instantly convey the message. Where are they going to convey the message? They're going to convey the message to the motor neuron. Your motor neuron is going to instantly take that message and it is going to take it to the effector. Effector, in this particular case, the effector will be the muscles of the leg. If you talk about, for example, if I put my hand on the hot plate and I move my hand away, so the effector is the muscle of the arm. If you smell something really good, right? So the stimulus, what is stimulus? Food, the smell of food. What is the receptor? The receptors in your nose, right? They will convey the message through the sensory neuron, through your spinal cord, up to the motor neuron to the effector. What is the effector? Your taste buds, your salivary gland, right? And you will smell the good food and you salivate. So this is, what is this? This is a factor. A factor can be a muscle or it can be some kind of gland, right? The temperature gets really hot, your body starts to sweat. Who is the factor? Sweat glands. You smell good food, your mouth starts to salivate. Who is the affector? Salivary muscles. So, something comes close to your eye and you blink. What is the affector? The muscles of the eye, right? So we can have affector. Affector in this case will be the muscles of the leg, but the affector can include both muscles as well as glands. And you will end up getting a response. What will be the response? In this case, our response is going to be that the leg will move. The person's leg will automatically move when tapped with the hammer. So, and now over here, you guys should not just know the steps of the reflex arc. I'm also going to share with you guys over here a diagram. The reason I'm sharing that diagram is for your um the reason I'm sharing the diagram with you guys is because the labeling of the diagram sometimes comes in your exam questions. So please just give me 1 second. Let me share that. All right. So this is the diagram that I wanted to share with you guys. Okay. So see, this is a different example in which the stimulus was the pin, right? The person stepped on the pin. What is going to happen? The stimulus is going to be carried. This is the pain receptors over here. Okay. The message will go from the sensory neuron to the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, the message will transmit to the motor neuron, and the motor neuron will go to the effector. Over here, the effector is the muscle, and the muscle will respond by moving the foot away from the pain. Now, over here, let's look at the spinal cord specifically. Once So the now over here, when we look at our spinal cord specifically, right? So in our spinal cord, what are we going to see? This is your sensory neuron, this one. Okay, this is your sensory neuron. Now, over here in the middle, this is your relay neuron, right? This over here, the one in orange, that's your relay neuron. If you remember, I told you that the relay neuron is found in the central nervous system and it connects two nerves with each other. And then we have our motor neuron. The one in green is the motor neuron. Okay. This, you see this yellow, this circle, this is the cell body. This is the cell body. Now, when we talk about our so this is how the reflex arc actually happens, and the must information is going to travel where? It is going to travel to the spinal cord. Why does it travel to the spinal cord? Because the reason it travels to the spinal cord is to allow for fast transmission, because you want the body to respond ASAP, and which is why uh, your spinal cord is where the message will go. Now, this is not, I'm not saying that the message will not go to the brain. The message will go to the brain. You will know that your leg is moving, but you can't do anything to stop it. If you put your hand on something hot, your body will respond instantly. You will know what has happened, but you can't stop it. Right? So the coordination, the control is coming from the spinal cord, right? But that does not mean that the message will not go to the brain. The message will go to the brain, but the spinal cord is the one that is actually going to be controlling it. Now, if you look over here, you will see that there are two parts of the spinal cord, right? One part from where the sensory neuron is entering, and one part from where the motor neuron is leaving. The part from where the sensory neuron is entering, we call it the dorsal root. The part from where the sensory neurons enter is known as the dorsal root. And the part from where the sensory neurons, sorry, not the sensory neurons, from where the motor neurons are going to be leaving, that part is known as the ventral root. You don't have to study the spinal cord in too much detail, but this is mentioned in your extended syllabus, right? If I make for you guys the structure of a spinal cord, so the structure of a spinal cord looks something like this. Right? One second, sorry. Right? So this, the central part that I've drawn for you guys, this is the central part that I have drawn for you guys. This is going to be known as your gray matter. This part on the outside, this part is your white matter. This is from where the sensory nerve will enter. That will be your, wherever the sensory nerve will enter from, that's the dorsal root. And from where your motor neuron will leave, that's the ventral root. When we are going to talk about it, so we have our gray matter. Gray matter is where all the cell bodies are located. So, all the cell bodies of the nerves inside the spinal cord. Not every single cell body, not every single cell body in the nervous system, but the cell bodies of the cells in the cells in the spinal cord. They're all going to be located in the gray matter, and the white matter has the nerve fibers. So this is how the structure of your spinal cord actually looks like. Now, when we talk about our reflexes, so as you can see, like I told you guys, we have relay neurons, right? The relay neurons, what was the function of the relay neurons? The function of the relay neurons was that your relay neurons provide connection. That's what I had told you, that they provide connection that allows one thing to link with another thing. But when we talk about connection, how does that connection happen? To understand how that connection happens, we need to understand synapses. Let's go ahead and talk about what are synapses. Synapses are connections from one neuron to another. Now, let's study about the structure of a synapse. Okay. So, when we talk about a synapse connects one neuron to another. So, it allows the electrical impulse to pass from one neuron to another. How does the synapse actually work? So, I am going to draw, let's say that we are seeing a connection between a motor neuron and a sensory neuron. Okay. So this is what it will look like. This is the ends. Okay. The one on the top is the end of the sensory neuron, and the one at the bottom is the end of the motor neuron. So this is when we talk about our synapse. Okay. So what is first thing that we have to understand is how the process of synapse happens. And then you guys should also know how to draw your diagrams and how to make your labeling. So over here, this is known as presynaptic membrane. This is the sensory neuron. Presynaptic membrane. Presynaptic because it is before the synapse. This is the motor neuron. So the membrane of the motor neuron will be known as postsynaptic membrane. Postsynaptic membrane, right? Because it's after the synapse. And in between, we have a gap. This gap can be known as the synaptic gap, or you can call it the synaptic cleft. Both terms are accurate and both terms are acceptable. Now, what is going to happen? How does the process happen? The process happens like this, that inside your synapse, you inside your sensory neuron, the presynaptic membrane, we have some vesicles. Those vesicles carry a really important chemical. That chemical is known as a neurotransmitter. Neuro means nerves, transmitter means that it will allow communication, right? So we have this molecule that is known as neurotransmitter. Now, what is going to happen, that when the sensory neuron wants to communicate with the motor neuron, the sensory neuron wants to pass the information to the motor neuron. So it will release these vesicles. The sensory neuron will release the vesicles into the synaptic cleft. Now, on the postsynaptic membrane, we have a bunch of receptors. Okay. Now, what is going to happen, that these vesicles are going to be released. The neurotransmitter is going to be released. Now, the neurotransmitter is going to the neurotransmitter is going to be released. After the neurotransmitter has been released, on the postsynaptic membrane, we have a bunch of receptors, right? The neurotransmitter will bind to those receptors. And when the neurotransmitter will bind to those receptors, the nerve impulse will be able to travel from one area to another. The nerve impulse will be able to travel from the sensory neuron to the motor neuron. And that is how the process happens. Right? So this is the function of a synapse. This is what a synapse does. So a synapse, how is it going to work? Let's look at our step. Nerve impulse arrives at the presynaptic cleft. This is followed by release of neurotransmitter. That neurotransmitter binds to receptors on the postsynaptic membrane. And number 4, the nerve impulse will travel to the motor neuron. Over here, where you're saying release of neurotransmitter, you can add a line. You can say that the neurotransmitter will diffuse across the synaptic cleft. Okay, the neurotransmitter will diffuse along the synaptic cleft. It will get to the postsynaptic membrane and then it will bind to the receptors. This is how your synapse works. By the way, any confusion so far? Does anybody have any portion that's not making sense? Any part that's not clear? No. Al Johara, everything all clear? Any confusion, anything so far? Al Johara, all clear?
Yes.
All right. So, Now, another important topic that we have to talk about is when you talk about your body. So, your body responds in two ways. Your body can respond in Your body can respond in two ways. Your body can have either voluntary actions or your body can have involuntary actions. So, let's go ahead and take a look at that. Why is it that our body can have voluntary and involuntary actions? So, you guys should know the differences between voluntary and involuntary actions. Okay, I'm going to share with you guys a table of the differences between them that will make it easy for you guys to learn it. Please just give me 1 minute. This is the table. I've added this table to make it easy for you guys to learn the topic. Okay. So when you talk about voluntary action involves conscious thought, right? If I want to lift my hands up, I will do so consciously, right? If I'm speaking to you guys, I am speaking consciously. If I'm writing on the tablet, I'm writing consciously. That is voluntary action. Involuntary action does not involve any conscious thought. My breathing is involuntary. I cannot control it. Half of the time, you don't even know that, how the body is managing it. Your heart rate, you cannot control your heart rate. Your blinking, you cannot control your blinking. All of these are considered as involuntary actions, right? Um, when we talk about our voluntary action, so involuntary action, example is like the example is given over here. If you want to ask a question, we will raise our hand. That is a once that is voluntary response. While involuntary action is obviously going to be the knee jerk, which I gave you guys an example, your heart beating, all of that. When you talk about involuntary action, so involuntary action is a quick response to avoid danger, right? If I put my hand on something hot, I want to be able to respond to it instantly. If there is suddenly a flight or fight situation, let's say that there is someone coming, you see a snake, right? Your heart is going to start beating faster to help you run away, while conscious thought involves experience, right? The more experience I'm going to become, the better I'm going to get at doing it. Then the response is controlled by the forebrain. Forebrain is the front part of the brain. Okay. You guys don't have to learn this in a lot of detail. Just learn that this is controlled by the forebrain. Forebrain is the front part of the brain. Not technically the front part, but yeah, the front part. And then the response or involuntary action is all controlled by your brain stem, by the area of the brain that are located backwards. For voluntary action, the response time is slow because you need to think, you need to decide, then you respond, right? If I ask you guys a question, you guys will think before responding. Involuntary action is a rapid response. Now, in voluntary action, the same stimulus can produce various responses. For example, once again, same example. I ask you guys a question. Each time you might give me a different answer. Sometimes you might not give me an answer at all, right? Even though the question is the same. You are hungry. Sometimes you say, all right, I'm going to have food. Sometimes you say, oh no, I'm not going to eat anything. I'll eat something later, right? So, same stimulus, but you get different responses. While in involuntary action, the same stimulus will always give you the same response. You put your hand on something hot, your body will remove it away. There's nothing you can do about it, right? So that is the differences between voluntary and involuntary actions. So you guys should be able to distinguish between the two of them, right? Even if you guys don't give such a detailed answer, just the points that I've highlighted, make sure you include them in your differences. All clear? Does anybody have any question? Hajra, Al Johara, any part that's not making sense? Or does anybody have any question regarding anything? No. Perfect. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to stop over here for today. Now, in our next class, we're going to take a look at our sense organs. One of the sense organs that you guys have to study in detail is the topic of eye. So we are going to study about the topic of eye in detail in the next class. And then, so in this topic, we are left with eye, and we have to go over the hormonal control, and we have to go over your homeostasis, right? These are the three major things in this topic that we have to go over. So we are going to go ahead and continue with this topic in the next class.